There's something both comforting and unsettling about spending the holidays at home. The same creaky staircase I used to sneak down on Christmas mornings, the scent of cinnamon and pine wafting through the house, and my mom's enthusiastic, relentless attempts to get me to settle down with someone, anyone, who met her standards. This year, though, felt different, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. It was New Year's Eve, and my mom was humming as she arranged a tray of cookies. The annual neighborhood potluck was in full swing downstairs, the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses drifting up to my room. I was dragging my feet, as usual, about joining. These things always turned into a parade of questions about my love life. But tonight, there was one name that kept coming up in conversation: Dave. "Diana, did you hear? Dave is in town," my mom had announced earlier that morning, her eyes sparkling with a little too much excitement. I almost dropped my coffee. Dave. The same Dave who used to tease me mercilessly about my crooked pigtails, who taught me how to ride a bike without training wheels, and who was my partner in crime every summer until he left for college. The same Dave who hadn't been back in 5 years. "What's he doing here?" I asked, feigning disinterest while my heart inexplicably skipped a beat. "His mother practically dragged him back," Mom said with a knowing smirk. "And he's single, Diana." There it was. The matchmaking agenda. I made my way downstairs that evening, reluctantly clad in a black dress Mom had insisted would catch someone's eye. The living room was packed with familiar faces, all older now, but still wearing the same warm smiles. And then I saw him. Dave. He was standing near the fireplace, deep in conversation with my dad. His broad shoulders filled out his sweater vest, and the boyish grin I remembered had been replaced by a confident, yet slightly reserved smile. He looked different. Older. Wiser. More handsome than I cared to admit. "Diana." His voice cut through the noise as soon as our eyes met. He excused himself and walked toward me, his expression a mix of surprise and joy. "Wow. It's been a while." 5 years, give or take, I said, trying to sound casual, though my pulse was anything but. "How's the big tech CEO life treating you?" He laughed, the sound warm and familiar. "Exhausting. Mom thought I needed a break, hence this trip." The infamous parental guilt trip, I teased. We fell into easy conversation, reminiscing about childhood adventures, laughing over embarrassing stories, and catching up on lost time. But underneath it all, there was something unspoken, a tension, a curiosity, like we were both trying to figure out how much of the other had changed. As the night wore on, the potluck turned into a countdown party. Everyone gathered in the backyard, bundled in coats and scarves, as fireworks lit up the sky. Dave and I stood side by side, the crisp winter air nipping at our cheeks. "I missed this," he admitted softly, his breath visible in the cold. "The simplicity of it all. Life's gotten so complicated."
"Yeah.
"Well, you've got an empire to run," I said, nudging him lightly. "An empire that feels pretty empty sometimes," he said, looking at me with an intensity that made my stomach flip. "What about you, Diana? What's life like these days?" I hesitated. How could I sum up the past 5 years? The heartbreaks, the career struggles, the constant feeling that I was waiting for something, or someone, I couldn't quite name. "It's fine," I said finally. "Stable. But I don't know, maybe I've been playing it safe." He nodded, like he understood. And for a moment, we just stood there, watching the fireworks in silence. The next day, Dave's mom invited my family over for brunch. It was obvious the matchmaking mission was in full swing, but neither of us protested. If anything, I found myself looking forward to seeing him again. We spent the afternoon walking through the old neighborhood, pointing out places that held memories, the treehouse we built, and subsequently fell out of, the ice cream shop where he dared me to eat a triple scoop cone, the park where we used to race our bikes. "It's strange," he said, as we sat on a bench overlooking the frozen pond. "I've been to so many places, met so many people, but nothing ever feels like home." Maybe you've been looking in the wrong places, I said, surprising even myself with the softness in my voice. He looked at me then, his eyes searching mine like he was trying to decipher a puzzle. Maybe. The next few days were a whirlwind. Dave and I were practically inseparable, much to our mother's delight. We laughed like kids, shared stories like old friends, and argued like we always did about everything from the best pizza toppings to whether his career was worth the toll it took on him. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. One evening, we went to a local bar with some old friends. I overheard one of them, a guy who'd always had a thing for me, teasing Dave about finally making a move. "You don't know what you're talking about," Dave said, his tone sharp, but his expression guarded. Later, when we were walking back to my house, I couldn't help but bring it up. "So, what was that about?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Nothing," he said quickly. Too quickly. "Dave, come on. I know when you're lying." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't want to make things awkward, Diana. But
Yeah,
people are talking. Our parents aren't exactly subtle." "Let them talk," I said, though my heart was pounding. "What do you care?" He stopped walking and turned to face me. "Because I do care. About you." The air between us felt electric, but before I could respond, he stepped back, shaking his head. This was a bad idea. I shouldn't have come back. He walked away before I could stop him. I didn't see him the next day. Or the day after that. His mom said he was busy with work, but I knew better. He was avoiding me. And it hurt more than I wanted to admit. On New Year's Eve, I found myself standing alone in my room, staring at the dress I'd worn the night we reconnected. Part of me wanted to stay in and sulk, but another part of me, a braver, more stubborn part, refused to let things end like this. So I grabbed my coat and headed to his house. Dave was in the garage, tinkering with the old car we used to drive around in during high school. He looked up when I walked in, surprise flickering across his face. "Diana. What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I said, crossing my arms. "Hiding out?" He sighed, wiping his hands on a rag. "I wasn't hiding. Could have fooled me." He leaned against the car, his expression unreadable. "Look, Diana, this week, it's been amazing. But I'm not the same guy you used to know. I've got baggage, responsibilities." "And you think I don't?" I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. "Life isn't perfect for anyone, Dave. But you don't get to decide for me whether this, whatever this is worth it." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something shift in his eyes. "You're right," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been running from a lot of things, but the truth is, I don't want to run from you." That night, as the clock struck midnight, Dave and I stood together under the stars. The fireworks painted the sky in brilliant colors, but all I could see was him. "Happy New Year," he said, his voice warm and full of promise. "Happy New Year," I replied, leaning into him. It wasn't the fairy tale ending our parents had probably imagined. But it was real. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. After the fireworks faded and the last chorus of Auld Lang Syne died down, reality crept back in like a cold breeze. Dave and I had shared a kiss, a moment full of promise and hope, but we both knew what was coming. He was set to leave for Chicago the next morning, back to his high-rise office and busy CEO life. And me? I had a life here in our small town, my design projects, my family, my routines. We tried not to dwell on it that night, but as he walked me home, his hand brushing against mine, the weight of
goodbye
hung heavy between us. "You could come with me," he said softly, standing on my porch. I smiled, though my heart ached. "And leave behind everything I've built here? That's not fair to either of us." He nodded, understanding but clearly disappointed. "Then I guess it's
goodbye
for now." For now, I echoed, though deep down, I wasn't sure how true that was. At first, we tried. We really did. Late-night calls, text messages, even the occasional video chat. But life has a way of getting in the way. His schedule was grueling, and I was busy with new clients. Slowly, the calls became less frequent, the messages shorter. Until one day, there was nothing. I told myself it was for the best. Long-distance relationships were hard, and maybe we were just two people who had shared a beautiful moment but weren't meant to last. Still, I couldn't help but think about him. Every time I saw a couple walking hand in hand, every time I heard a certain song on the radio, I wondered if he ever thought about me, too. Months later, I received an email that changed everything. A well-known interior design firm in Chicago had seen my work online and wanted me to join their team. It was the kind of opportunity I dreamed of but never thought I'd get. When I called my mom to tell her the news, her excitement was contagious. "This is your big break, Diana. You're going to do amazing things." I packed up my life in a whirlwind of boxes and bittersweet goodbyes, determined to make the most of this fresh start. Dave wasn't even a factor in my mind as I drove into the bustling city, the skyline towering over me like a promise of something new. The first night in my new apartment was chaotic. Boxes were everywhere, my furniture wasn't fully assembled, and the Wi-Fi didn't work. I ended up sprawled on the couch with takeout, calling my mom to update her. "So, how's the big city treating you?" she asked, her voice teasing. "Exhausting," I admitted, laughing. "But good. It feels right." We chatted for a while before she let something slip. "Oh, by the way, I ran into Dave's mom the other day. Lovely woman. She seemed so interested in your move." "Mom," I groaned. "You didn't tell her I'm here, did you?" "Of course not," she said, but her tone wasn't convincing. "Well, maybe. She might have asked." I rolled my eyes but let it go. It wasn't like it mattered. Dave and I hadn't spoken in months, and I doubted he even thought about me anymore. The next morning, I walked into the sleek, glass-paneled office of my new firm, nervous but excited. The receptionist greeted me with a warm smile and handed me a welcome packet. As I made my way to my desk, I stopped in my tracks. A bouquet of roses sat waiting for me, vibrant and fragrant, with a small white card tucked among the petals. My heart raced as I picked it up. "Welcome, partner." "D. Partner?" I frowned, confused but intrigued. Then, at the bottom of the card, it said, "Look down." I turned the card over, my curiosity piqued, and looked down. There he was. Dave. He was standing just a few feet away, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, hands in his pocket and wearing that signature grin that made my knees weak. For a moment, I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. "Surprise," he said, his voice soft but filled with amusement. "What? How?" I stammered, my thoughts spinning. He stepped closer, his expression turning serious. "I know we lost touch, and that's on me. But when my mom told me you were moving to Chicago, I couldn't let this chance slip away. I pulled some strings with the firm's owner, he's a client of mine, and here you are. And here I am." My heart was doing somersaults. "You orchestrated this?" "Guilty," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "But I wanted to make things right. I let you go once, Diana. I'm not making that mistake again." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to be angry at his meddling, but the larger part, the part that had missed him desperately, was overwhelmed with gratitude. "You're insane," I finally said, but I couldn't stop the smile spreading across my face. "And maybe a little bit brilliant." "Does that mean you'll give me another chance?" he asked, his voice full of hope. I didn't answer with words. Instead, I stepped forward and blew him a kiss, right there in the middle of the office. The applause and cheers from my new coworkers only made the moment sweeter. That evening, Dave and I walked through the city, the streets aglow with lights and the promise of new beginnings. He held my hand as we talked about everything and nothing, making up for lost time. This time, he said, stopping to look at me, I'm not going anywhere. And neither are you. I laughed. You can't get rid of me that easily. And as we stood there, the world bustling around us, I realized that sometimes, love has a way of finding its way back to you, no matter how far apart you've been.